Hello? This story takes place in Taranto, a province located in the southeastern part of Italy. To the south of this province is a small town named Abitrana, famous for its historical buildings, narrow alleys, bustling markets, and beautiful beaches. The town has over 7,000 long-term residents. The main character of the story is 15-year-old Sara Scazzi, a lively and cheerful girl. Her family consists of 4 members: her father, Giacomo Scazzi, her mother, Concetta Serrano Spagnolo, and her brother, Claudio Scazzi. Sara lived with her mother in Avitrana, while her father and brother worked in the construction industry in Milan, only occasionally coming home. Sometimes her brother would come home only during holidays to reunite with the family. Sara always yearned to live in a vibrant city like the one her brother described. She was a 10th grade student who was always eager for new experiences, loved animals, enjoyed socializing, and was a fan of celebrities. Her room was covered with posters of her idol, Avril Lavigne, and she often tried to emulate her makeup style. Every summer, Sara enjoyed surfing at the beach. However, one day, a calamity unexpectedly struck, shattering her beautiful life. What misfortunes did Sara encounter? Let's delve into this case in detail. On August 26, 2010, during the hot summer weather in Avitrana, Sara was eager to go to the beach. She texted her cousin Sabrina Misseri, inviting her to go to the beach in the afternoon. At 2:30 p.m., Sara left her house alone, wearing a pink t-shirt, flip-flops, and carrying a black cloth bag over her shoulder with a mobile phone in her hand, a recent gift from her brother. Sara's house was only about 600 meters away from her cousin's house, so she planned to visit her cousin first before heading to the beach together. However, the short walk that should have taken only a few minutes took Sara unusually long. At 2:40 p.m., Sabrina had been waiting at home for a while, but still didn't see Sara. She found it odd since Sara was usually very punctual and never broke her promises. Even if something unexpected came up, she would inform her in advance. Thinking of this, Sabrina immediately texted Sara asking when she would arrive. 2 minutes later, Sabrina still hadn't received a reply, so she called Sara's mobile phone only to find that it was turned off. Sabrina was slightly surprised, but not too shocked because Sara, now 15 years old, was going through her rebellious teenage years. She often quarreled with her mother at home, and in severe cases she would threaten to run away. Her mother, Concetta, had no choice but to indulge her daughter. Sabrina thought that perhaps her cousin had argued with her mother and was in a bad mood, thus unable to go to the beach. As evening approached, Concetta was still waiting for her daughter to come home for dinner. When she didn't see her daughter for a long time, she called Sara's mobile phone only to get a message that the phone was turned off. Thinking that Sara's phone battery had died, she contacted Sabrina to ask if she knew where Sara was. Sabrina told her that Sara's phone had been off since the afternoon. Concetta, worried, reached out to everyone she could, but no one knew where her daughter was. Realizing the severity of the situation, she immediately called the police and also contacted a famous missing person search program in Italy for help. Soon after, Sara's entire family and friends set out to search for her throughout the night. They scoured almost every street in Avitrana, but to no avail. After receiving the report, the police also began their investigation and search efforts. According to the police investigation, 15-year-old Sara was a minor who had been missing for quite some time, and the situation was not looking promising. Initially, the police ruled out the possibility of a kidnapping. It was found that Sara's family was not wealthy. She lived with her mother while her father and brother worked long-term in Milan. The police then proceeded to question Sara's family and friends, reconstructing her movements on the day she went missing. According to her mother Concetta's testimony, at 9 a.m. that day, Sara left home to buy ice cream for her cousin and then returned home. At 12 p.m., Sara went out again to buy some items at a grocery store and returned home at 1 p.m. At 1:55 p.m., Sara received a message from Sabrina inviting her to come over. After 2 p.m., Sara left home and disappeared. However, according to her cousin Sabrina, Sara left home at 2:30 p.m. There was thus some discrepancy regarding the time Sara left home, as her mother said it was 2 p.m. while her cousin said it was 2:30 p.m. The police checked the message history between Sara and her cousin, and at 2:23 p.m. that day, Sabrina received a message from Sara saying, "Wait for me a bit, I'm putting on my swimsuit, I'll be right there." At 2:25 p.m., Sabrina texted Sara, "Put on your swimsuit quickly and come over." At 2:28 p.m., she texted again asking if Sara had left home yet, but Sara couldn't reply as her phone was out of credit. According to their prior arrangement, Sara would give her cousin a missed call and hang up as soon as the phone rang to confirm she was on her way. Based on Sabrina's information, Sarah disappeared on her way to her cousin's house. Therefore, the police searched along the route from Sarah's house to Sabrina's house. They questioned neighbors and passers-by, checked narrow streets, alleys, and wastelands. At the same time, the police and Sarah's family printed and distributed a series of missing person flyers around the town. Some witnesses then provided clues to the police. Mrs. A reported that around 2:30 p.m. she saw Sarah leaving her house, walking out of the alley in front of her home, followed by a stray dog. The dog was a mixed breed resembling a German shepherd named Sayeta. Sarah often fed it, so it followed her everywhere. Mr. B told the police that at 2:33 p.m. that day, when he and his wife drove through the area, he saw a young girl walking alone at a street corner. Her blonde hair was very noticeable, and although Mr. B only saw her briefly, he was sure that the girl was Sarah. The timestamps mentioned by these witnesses matched Sabrina's testimony. This meant that Sarah's disappearance occurred between 2:33 p.m. and 2:42 p.m. The case caused a public uproar. People began examining Sarah's daily life and social media activities, searching for any motive that could have led to her disappearance. Some media blamed Sarah for her own disappearance, speculating that she might have run away to Milan to find her father. However, this speculation was quickly dismissed when Sarah's father denied it, stating that as soon as he heard of his daughter's disappearance, he immediately returned from Milan to Avitrana to join the search for her. There were also rumors that Sarah was living with a middle-aged man she met online, having some social relationship issues and planning to run away with him. Other rumors suggested that Sarah longed to live in a bustling city, was bored with her current life in the small town, and wanted to escape. Sarah's parents firmly denied these baseless rumors and all negative information about their daughter, believing that she had been kidnapped. Sabrina's family, her cousins, spent most of their time supporting Sarah's mother, assisting the police with the investigation and responding to media interviews. The police later investigated a middle-aged man who had been in contact with Sarah on Facebook. He was a pastry chef living nearby, and Sarah had often confided in him about the pressures and troubles in her life, expressing her desire to leave the boring town. Sarah was addicted to social media and had met many men in real life. After the incident, the police searched for people who might have taken her but found no evidence that she had been forced to leave. As time passed and Sarah had been missing for a few weeks, media interest in the case increased. To find Sarah, her family began appearing regularly on television shows, hoping that the public's help would bring Sarah home. On September 8, 2010, the residents of Avitrana organized a march to search for Sarah. Sabrina, Sarah's cousin, also participated, joining others in the effort to find Sarah and urging the perpetrator to release her. A month passed since Sarah's disappearance, and although the police received several reports from witnesses, there was no progress in solving the case. On September 29th, Michel Messeri, Sabrina's father and Sarah's uncle, returned home to retrieve a screwdriver he had forgotten the previous day. While passing through an olive grove, he noticed something shiny reflecting light. Curious, he moved the bushes aside and discovered a half-burned mobile phone. Michel felt the keychain on the phone looked familiar, resembling his niece Sarah's phone. To confirm, he called Sabrina to ask about the design of Sarah's phone and confirmed that it was indeed Sarah's phone, but the battery and SIM card were missing. Many people doubted Michel's discovery, suspecting he was the one who caused Sarah's disappearance and burned the phone. In fact, the police had also suspected him because on the day of the incident, someone saw Sarah passing through Michel's gate, while the stray dog following her stayed outside on the street. Regarding this clue, Michel immediately denied it, saying he had not seen Sarah on the day of the incident. As for the stray dog lying in front of his house, he claimed it might have just come for food. With public outcry growing, the police focused their investigation on Michel. They discovered that on the day Sarah went missing, Michel had been working in his garage. The police also heard shocking information from some of Sarah's friends, who said that Sarah had often confided in them that Michel had been harassing her for months, making her feel distressed and uneasy. On October 6, 2010, the police interrogated Michel. That day, Sarah's mother, Concetta, was invited to a television program dedicated to helping find missing people. In front of thousands of viewers, the host revealed a devastating truth to Concetta. Her daughter had passed away because Michel had just confessed his crime to the police. Concetta was overwhelmed and truly shocked upon hearing the news, expressing, "I'm trying to understand what happened," before leaving the studio. Many people expressed outrage towards the show's production team, as informing a mother about her daughter's death on live television was considered extremely cruel. During the interrogation that day, after more than 9 hours of questioning, Michel finally could not withstand the psychological pressure and confessed to his crime. He stated that on the day of the incident, he was repairing a tractor in his garage. At 2:25 p.m., Sarah unexpectedly appeared in the garage and called out to him as her uncle. Michelle, who was working on the tractor, felt an indescribable joy. When Sarah was about to leave, he hurriedly grabbed her with the intention of assaulting her, but Sarah resisted fiercely. Michelle then wrapped a rope around her neck and restrained her arms. The 15-year-old Sarah was no match for him, and Michelle strangled her to death in the garage. After killing Sarah, Michelle lost all sense of humanity and continued to assault her body. He then put Sarah's body in the trunk of his car and drove to a remote farm, where he dumped her into an abandoned well and covered it. He proceeded to burn all of Sarah's belongings, which explained why the phone found later was partially burned. The police subsequently found Sarah's DNA in Michelle's car. They went to the burial site Michelle had disclosed and conducted an excavation. Finally, they found Sarah's body at the bottom of the abandoned well. Having been submerged in water for 6 weeks, the lower part of the body was severely decomposed, making it impossible to determine if she had been assaulted. However, there were clear signs that she had been strangled to death. On October 9, 2010, a grand funeral was held for Sarah, attended by thousands of people. Sarah was buried in the city cemetery. Everyone was outraged by the cruel actions of Michelle, the victim's uncle. Due to his disheveled appearance in front of the media, people called him the monster of Avitrana. To protect him from attacks by other inmates, the police held him in a separate cell awaiting trial. The autopsy results showed that Sarah's body was severely decomposed, making it impossible to determine if she had been assaulted. Bruises on her arms were consistent with being tightly gripped or restrained, and there was a deep mark on her neck from a 2 centimeters wide belt with the cause of death, identified as asphyxiation. The investigation seemed to have concluded with Sarah's body being found, and the case appeared to be solved, but the police did not fully trust Michelle's testimony, as he had changed his story multiple times with many inconsistencies and illogical points. In the following days, Michelle initially confessed to killing Sarah after assaulting her, but then changed his story, claiming Sarah accidentally fell and hit her head on the floor, leading to her death. The police believed the case was still unclear because Michelle seemed to be hiding the truth, and they even considered the bold assumption that the perpetrator might be someone else. Considering the time Sarah was killed and Sabrina's testimony, it can be inferred that around 2:50 p.m., Michelle drove with Sarah's body 8 kilometers to the burial site. This route included 1 kilometer of urban roads, 3 segments of rural roads, and 1 kilometer of unpaved dirt roads filled with ruts and slopes. Just the driving alone would have taken Michelle at least several dozen minutes. According to Michelle's testimony, after arriving at an old barn, he took Sarah's body out of the car and dragged her under a tree to assault her. He then dressed Sarah before driving her 700M to an abandoned well. Years before, he had used a large rock to cover the well, so upon arriving, Michelle undressed Sarah again, threw her into the well, and covered it with rocks and soil. After finishing this, he went to a field 1 kilometer away to burn Sarah's clothes and backpack. He returned home at 3:25 p.m. However, this timeline did not match the witnesses' statements, as some witnesses reported seeing Michelle driving home around 3:45 p.m. on the day of the incident. According to Michelle, he completed all his actions within 45 minutes. The police believed it was unlikely he could have done all of this alone, and did not rule out the possibility that he had an accomplice. The police continued to investigate those who might have collaborated with Michelle in the crime. A month and a half later, while on patrol, a prison guard accidentally overheard Michelle mumbling to himself, "My daughter Sabrina called me for help. Sarah entered my garage, and then Michelle killed Sarah." The police began to suspect that Sarah's cousin Sabrina might have been involved in the crime. During the investigation, some of her behaviors were very strange. For example, after Sarah disappeared, she went to Sarah's house and asked Sarah's mother for Sarah's diary, lying that it was a request from the police. Additionally, some of Sarah's friends told the police that they had witnessed unusual behavior from her after the incident, such as suddenly crying and feeling sad, then bursting into laughter. At the time, they thought Sabrina was unable to accept the truth about her cousin's disappearance, leading to some emotional instability. Sabrina often told her friends that her cousin must have been kidnapped. Since her father, Michelle, was arrested, Sabrina seemed to have become a figure of compassion. She frequently appeared on television interviews saying her father should pay for what he had done. On October 16th, Michelle unexpectedly confessed to the police that his daughter, Sabrina, was also involved in the crime and was even the mastermind. He claimed that on the day of the incident, Sabrina lured Sarah into his garage and then told him to hold Sarah's arms. Sabrina then used a belt to strangle Sarah harshly, saying, "Let's teach her a lesson. Kill her." 2 days later, the police arrested Sabrina on charges of murder. Cosimo Serrano, Sabrina's mother, defended her daughter. She stated, "I don't want to visit my husband in prison. I need to tell him that based on his lies and slander, their daughter is now being held in the cell next to him." The police then interrogated Michel again, and he stated that the day before the incident, his daughter had argued with Sarah over a man. During the subsequent investigation, the police also found Sarah's diary, which documented arguments between her and Sabrina before the incident, as well as the story involving a man. Sarah wrote in her diary on July 28, 2010, "Hi, I'm Sarah. Recently I have had a very good relationship with a 27-year-old guy. I'm only 15, but he treats me very well, always hugging me. His name is Ivano. My cousin Sabrina also likes him, but I don't know if I like him or just consider him a friend. I am very confused." At this point in the investigation, the police finally uncovered a love triangle between Sarah, Sabrina, and a man named Ivano. The man mentioned in the diary was 27 years old. 2 months before the incident, Sarah wrote in her diary, "Yesterday I went to the beach with Sabrina and Ivano. I had a lot of fun. However, Sabrina told me that next time she wants to be alone with Ivano and that I have to stay home. When she said that, I felt very uncomfortable and tense. It seemed that Sarah and Sabrina had started to have conflicts over a man from that moment." With this lead, the police approached Ivano. He stated that he had a very close relationship with both girls and had once been romantically involved with Sabrina, but they broke up because he did not want their friendship to turn into love. However, he never thought that the 15-year-old Sarah would like him, and he said he had not seen Sarah before the incident occurred. However, through thorough investigation, the police discovered that Ivano actually had strong feelings for Sarah and often showed her attention. This made Sabrina very angry, as she believed that Sarah's presence was the reason Ivano had broken up with her. On the night before the incident, several witnesses saw Sabrina and Sarah having a heated argument in the square. Sarah's diary also recorded this event. "Last night I went out with Sabrina, Mari, and Angela. We went to a bar to drink sodas and then went home. Sabrina got angry as usual because she said that every time Ivano appeared, he was always by my side. Of course, my cousin would think that. At least Ivano pampers me, but not her. I wish I had a boyfriend like him. Well, I'm used to it anyway." At this point, the police finally found the motive for the crime. Sabrina had killed her cousin Sarah out of jealousy. On November 6, 2010, Michel, Sabrina's father, retracted his initial confession and claimed that he had never assaulted Sarah, shifting all the blame for the murder onto his daughter. He stated that at 2 p.m. on the day of the incident, his daughter called him to come to the garage. When he arrived, Sarah was lying on the floor with a belt around her neck, and his daughter and wife were standing beside her, bewildered and not knowing what to do. His daughter then said that Sarah had accidentally fallen while playing in the garage. Michel knew that Sarah's death was not an accident, but his family decided to conceal the body. 9 months after the incident, the police received a tip from a flower shop owner. He reported that between 2 o'clock and 2:20 p.m. on the day of the incident, he saw 2 women dragging Sarah along the road and forcing her into a car. Another witness, Mr. C, stated that around 1:50 p.m. on the day of the incident, he saw 3 cars parked in front of Michel's house, and the garage door was open. A few minutes later, Sarah ran out of the garage looking disheveled and crying. Shortly after, Sabrina and Cosimo, her mother, also ran out, got into a car, and chased after Sarah. Based on the testimonies of the flower shop owner and Mr. C, the police suspected that Sabrina and her mother had driven to intercept Sarah and forced her into their car. By 2 p.m., the 3 of them had driven past the flower shop owner's truck. On May 26, 2011, the police arrested Cosimo, Sabrina's mother, on charges of murder and kidnapping. 5 days later, Michel was released after serving a 6-month sentence for concealing, destroying, or moving the body, though he would soon face prosecution for other crimes. Valentina, Sabrina's sister, always believed that Sarah was killed by her own father, not by Sabrina and her mother. She speculated that on that afternoon, Sarah had come to play in the family garage while her mother was taking a nap and Sabrina was not at home. Michel, being alone with Sarah, assaulted and killed her in a moment of loss of control. Valentina also mentioned that Sabrina once told her that if Sarah showed too much affection for Ivano in public, she would get angry, but it was only because Sabrina wanted to protect Sarah, not out of jealousy. People can be very cruel, and some attitudes can be misunderstood. Valentina recalled that Sabrina had once texted her saying, "Dad said he would help me kill Sarah. I think he's gone mad or it's just his strategy." In this case, the police also obtained a recording of a phone call made on October 6th when Michelle was being interrogated and confessed to the crime. At 10 p.m., Sabrina told her boyfriend Ivano that she was worried about her father and herself leaving fingerprints on Sarah's phone. She admitted to having touched Sarah's phone on the day of the incident, which led the police to discover that Sabrina's initial statements about Sarah's whereabouts that day were completely false. The message sent from Sarah's phone was actually sent by Sabrina, not Sarah herself. Sarah's mother's testimony was accurate. Sarah left the house at 2 p.m. on the day of the incident and was murdered at 2:30 p.m. Investigations revealed that Ivano was with Sabrina and Sarah 30 minutes before the murder and witnessed a fierce argument between the two cousins. If Ivano had told the truth from the beginning, the investigation might not have stalled. After Sabrina, Cosimo and Michelle were arrested. Michelle's brother Carmine confessed to the police that he had helped conceal Sarah's body. The investigation concluded on July 1st with 15 people charged with crimes, including murder, complicity in murder, concealing a body, kidnapping, theft, and perjury. A year and a half later, in November 2012, the trial was held at the Toronto court. Sabrina and her mother, Cosimo, were charged with murder. Michele, her father, was charged with concealing the body. After 15 months of trial, the court reached a verdict. Sabrina and Cosimo were convicted of murder and sentenced to life imprisonment. Michele was sentenced to 8 years for concealing the body, and Michelle's brother was sentenced to 6 years for the same crime. Ivano was sentenced to 5 years for perjury, and 2 defense lawyers were sentenced to 6 years for perjury. A previous defense lawyer was sentenced to 2 years for incitement. In July 2015, the Toronto court upheld the sentences for the 3 main defendants. Sabrina's former lawyer had his sentence reduced to 1 year and 4 months, and Michelle's brother had his sentence reduced to 4 years and 11 months. In this case, many people testified, including some initial witnesses who were friends of Sabrina and were incited by her and her mother. Sabrina developed hatred towards her cousin Sarah because her ex-boyfriend liked Sarah, and her mother also despised Sarah because the child of her sister was more beloved than her own daughter. Thus, she helped her daughter commit this heinous crime. Michelle, Sabrina's father, wanted to bear the blame alone to protect his family, but ultimately failed. Some of the negative criticisms directed at him were also true. The case ended with Sabrina and her mother, Cosimo, being imprisoned together in one cell. Michele, her father, was released from prison in February 2024. As for who actually killed Sarah that day, only they know the truth. In life, everyone makes mistakes, and that is unavoidable. However, when realizing one's own mistakes, the most important thing is to know how to fix and improve oneself. If we stubbornly refuse to change, or even try to hide those mistakes, the consequences will become even more serious. Early in the morning on March the 21st, 2000, Mr. Wang, the driver of the prosecutor's office in Hoshan County, Anhui Province, after having breakfast as usual, happily went to work. When he went to the security room to get the car keys, he suddenly felt something was wrong because the door was still closed when it is normally opened very early in the morning. Mr. Wang called out loudly several times but heard no response. He approached the window to look inside and was horrified by a sight that he would have difficulty forgetting for the rest of his life. His colleague, a 55-year-old named Wen, was lying motionless on the bed with a trail of blood extending along the wall corresponding to the position of the victim's head and arms. Panicked, Mr. Wang immediately called the police. When they arrived, they found the security room in great disarray and signs of a search while the TV was still on. According to the forensic doctor, the victim had died of circulatory failure and traumatic brain injury. The injuries on the victim's head were round and concave, consistent with being attacked with a blunt object like a hammer. In addition, the victim was also pierced in the neck by a sharp object leading to severe bleeding, a trace consistent with a sharp knife. The traces left at the scene showed that the perpetrator had climbed through the sliding glass window of the security room to enter and commit the crime, and had also left through this same route after the incident. This case has caused a stir in public opinion and has had a significant impact on the security of the area. The local police have stepped in to quickly investigate and apprehend the suspects. They have conducted a crime scene examination and collected evidence in the hope of being able to determine the method and route the perpetrators used to break into the prosecution office. Currently, this area has become an educational center, with many old windows replaced and additional security systems installed. In the year 2000, this location did not have any public surveillance cameras, and even the area around the prosecution office building was very quiet, especially at night. Opposite the prosecution office is a vacant lot where locals can grow clean vegetables. The security room has a glass door leading outside, and on the ground, the police found 2 blood-stained footprints with a circular pattern belonging to a common sports shoe size around 41 and 42. This indicates that the victim was attacked by 2 people using a hammer and a knife, and the presence of 2 different footprints proves that there were at least 2 perpetrators. These footprints indicate that one perpetrator was tall and the other was shorter, with the taller one likely being over 1.76 meters tall and weighing more than 70 kilograms. At the security room window, the police also found a very fresh fingerprint on the dusty surface. And on the door handle, there was a clear, bloody fingerprint proving that the perpetrator had gripped it to close the door. Continuing the crime scene investigation, the police discovered that the drawers and document cabinets were all open and some keys were still left in the locks. Additionally, on the 3rd and 4th floors, the police found many signs of ransacking. It appears that the perpetrators had ample time and left behind numerous traces at the crime scene, but the purpose of their actions remains unclear. While the police were continuing their investigation at the scene, an employee of the prosecutor's office ran in to report that a police car parked in the front yard of the building had gone missing. This car had previously been parked in the area marked by a red circle right next to the duty room. After receiving the report, the police immediately checked the front yard and discovered broken glass shards in the parking area, indicating that the car's windows had been smashed with a hammer. This further reinforced the hypothesis that the police car may have been taken by the perpetrator to flee the scene. In the course of the investigation, the Huoshan District Police put forward 3 main scenarios about the motive behind the case. First, Mr. Wen may have had a conflict with someone and was murdered at his workplace for the purpose of revenge. Second, the perpetrator may have come to look for something, perhaps the case files, and after being discovered by Mr. Wen, they immediately killed him to erase the evidence. Third, the suspect may have come to steal property such as a car, but was then discovered and resorted to killing the victim. During the investigation, the police also interviewed the employees at the prosecutor's office to learn about the victim. Everyone said that Mr. Wen was a hardworking and dedicated person who was loved by all. They did not know if he had any conflicts with anyone, but Mr. Wen had been working there for more than 20 years and was highly regarded by everyone. From the statements of Mr. Wen's family, the police learned that he did not have any conflicts with anyone in the area where he lived. However, there was one minor incident that occurred before he went home by motorcycle. While he by motorcycle, a child ran out, causing both him and the child to fall. After the examination, the child only suffered minor scratches, but the child's family demanded that Mr. Wen pay a rather large compensation. Although Mr. Wen did not have a high income, he had to agree to pay a third of the amount they requested. And after that, the child's father had repeatedly cursed and threatened to kill Mr. Wen. On the day of the incident, the man who was in conflict with Mr. Wen was not present in the local area, as he had taken his mother to receive medical treatment in Beijing a week earlier, so he had a very convincing alibi. The police conducted a thorough investigation, taking statements from the surrounding neighbors and checking Mr. Wen's relationships. The results showed that he did not have any grudges against anyone and also had no debts, so the motive of revenge due to personal conflict was ruled out. The police are also considering the possibility that this was the action of criminals seeking vengeance for court rulings they were dissatisfied with. However, after reviewing recent cases, they found that all cases were handled thoroughly and there were no instances of wrongful convictions. Furthermore, the case files have not been tampered with or gone missing. Regarding the motive of robbery, the police discovered that in the security guard's room there was still over 3,000 yuan in Mr. Wen's recent salary that he had not yet had the chance to take home, as he had been on night duty that day. Despite a thorough investigation, the police were unable to determine the motive or identify the perpetrators. After the investigation, the police realized that the culprits had thoroughly searched all floors of the building but did not take the money in the security guard's room, indicating that robbery was not their primary objective. Instead, stealing the police vehicle seemed to be for the purpose of escape rather than for theft, although using a police car would make them easily noticeable on the road. Based on the information gathered, the police have developed a new hypothesis. The criminals may have been targeting the armory in the prosecutor's office, as it is a highly secured and controlled space. Unfortunately, the exact location of the armory could not be determined. After discussions and identifying the initial motive of the suspects, the police concluded that these criminals are extremely bold and willing to kill during the break-in. The police have now cordoned off the area and determined the direction of the suspects' escape. Since they fled using the stolen police car, the most viable option is to locate the vehicle, which could lead to the resolution of the case. The police estimate that the vehicle could only go a maximum of about 50 kilometers because the vehicle only contained a small amount of fuel, so they expanded the search range to 60 kilometers to 70 kilometers and focused on the highway toll stations near National Highway 312. At one of the toll stations, an employee reported that they had seen a police car passing through around 5 a.m. and stopping to ask for directions, but because it was still dark, the employee could not clearly see the driver's face. After the employee pointed them in the direction, the police quickly drove about 10 kilometers before finding the abandoned vehicle, as the suspect had run out of gas and had to abandon the car and continue fleeing on foot. They knew how to remove and connect the electrical wires to start the car without a key, indicating they had knowledge of the vehicle's electronic system and the necessary tools. These skills and knowledge are only possessed by those who work in the auto repair industry or have studied automotive mechanics. Based on the location where the car was abandoned and the time it passed through the checkpoint at 5 a.m., the police determined the suspect could not have gone too far, so they divided into multiple groups and fanned out to search the surrounding area but did not obtain any useful results. The police then expanded the search by sending inquiries to local authorities, but still could not find any leads or suspicious suspects. At this point, the most valuable clue was the fingerprints collected from the crime scene, but since the technology at the time was not as advanced, the police had to manually compare them using traditional methods. They put in a lot of effort to search for and compare the fingerprints, but finding the suspect's whereabouts was extremely difficult, as China was just beginning to build a national fingerprint database system that was not as sophisticated as today's. The police had to use rather primitive equipment to compare each collected fingerprint against the samples of the suspect, a meticulous and time-consuming process. After numerous nationwide fingerprint analyses, the police still could not identify the perpetrator, but they still believed that with the development of technology, they would soon catch the criminal as long as they were still alive. 20 years have passed since the murder case occurred at the prosecutor's office, and by 2020, the fingerprint database had been further improved and many cases had been solved thanks to online comparison. The unsolved case of the murdered security guard from 20 years ago has also been added to the list of unresolved cases, and the fingerprints of the suspect have been entered into the wanted system. About 4 months later, the police received a report about a man in Jiangsu province whose fingerprints matched the case file. The Anhui police were extremely excited and manually compared the prints again, and the results confirmed that all the characteristic points of the fingerprints were exactly the same. The 42-year-old man named Wei Dongyu, who was living in Wujiang District, Jiangsu Province, has become the investigation target and the main suspect of the case that year. That very night, the Hoshan District Police immediately set out to Wujiang District, Jiangsu Province, to arrest the suspect. After arriving in Wujiang and further investigating the man named Wei Dongyu, the police confirmed that his occupation was a bus driver. The police made a plan to quickly and discreetly arrest Wei Dongyu, as they were concerned that his accomplices from that year might also be in Wujiang District. With the development of modern technology, any leak of information about the pursuit would make it very difficult to catch the remaining suspect if he fled. After discussion and research, the police planned to arrest Wei Dongyu. That early morning, they dressed in plain clothes and sat in his bus like regular passengers. 2 policemen sat in the middle of the bus, and 2 others sat at the front, near the door, ready to intervene if Wei Dongyu detected anything and tried to escape. They decided to wait until all the passengers had gotten off the bus before apprehending him to ensure the safety of everyone and keep the matter discreet. When only Wei Dongyu was left on the bus, one policeman pretended to have asthma and called the driver for help. When he stood up to go to the middle of the bus, the policeman immediately rushed in and arrested and restrained him. Wei Dongyu did not resist at all, but instead admitted his guilt. On the police bus, the police asked Wei Dongyu about what he had done in Hoshan District 20 years ago. He calmly replied that he had killed an old security guard and stolen a police car along with his friend named Zhang Shuigong. When faced with what he had done, Wei Dongyu broke down in tears, regretting his actions from that year. Wei Dongyu said he had never had a good night's sleep, and almost every night he had nightmares. In those dreams, he would often encounter an old man. Sometimes the old man would cry pitifully, but sometimes he would appear angry. Around 3 a.m. on August the 20th, 2020, with the assistance of the Jiangsu Provincial Police, the Hoshan District Police successfully arrested Zhang Shuigong while he was sleeping at his home. However, in contrast to Wei Dongyu, when questioned, this man did not admit to the crime. He even insisted that he had never been to Hoshan and knew nothing about the case. Although the police showed him Wei Dongyu's confession and the fact that they had arrested him based on information provided by his former accomplice, Zhang Shuegong, stubbornly refused to admit his guilt. Currently, the police do not have enough evidence to charge him as the fingerprints at the scene only match Wei Dongyu, not Zhang Shuegong. After a few days of fruitless interrogation, the police decided to change tactics. They no longer asked the suspect about the murder case or whether he had been to Huoshan. Instead, they told Zhang Shuegong about the murder case that year, the tragic death of the 55-year-old victim, and the suffering of Mr. Wen's family. They also told him about the stories Wei Dongyu had revealed as well as the nightmares in which he encountered the old security guard that had tormented him for over 20 years. After telling him all this, the police handed Zhang Shuegong a bottle of water and asked him, "Haven't you met that old man in your dreams for the past 20 years? How can you sleep well?" Faced with this question, Zhang Shuegong began to psychologically collapse, continuously bowing his head and shaking it. He began to cry and recount the story from that year when he and Wei Dongyu were still very young, only in their 20s. They wanted to earn a lot of money, but their abilities were limited, while their ambitions were very large. They wanted to start a business but had no capital and did not want to work as hired help, so they came up with a crazy idea to rob a bank to have startup capital. However, the problem was that they could not directly rob a bank, and they needed guns to increase their chances of success, but they did not know where to get guns. At that time, Wei Dongyu remembered that there were guns pictured in a newspaper article about the Huo Mountain Procuratorate in Anhui Province, and this area was quite deserted at night, so they set out to go there. On the night of March 21st, 2000, Wei Dongyu and Zhang Shuegong climbed into the building through a first-floor window carrying hammers and knives. When they were prying open the locks, they heard a noise from a small room and discovered a security guard sleeping. So they decided to knock the security guard unconscious to steal but not to kill him. However, Wei Dongyu used a knife while he used a hammer to attack the security guard, and unfortunately the guard died on the spot. After that, they went to the other floors to look for guns, but they had ransacked almost all the rooms without finding what they needed. Zhang Shuegong was more careful. He had prepared cloth gloves, while Wei Dongyu left fingerprints at the scene. At this point, dawn was beginning to break, making them impatient and wanting to leave. They went downstairs and found a police car, then used a hammer to break the car window. Because Wei Dongyu had previously worked as a mechanic, he knew how to bypass the ignition to start the car without a key. They drove for a while, but since they were not familiar with the terrain, they stopped at a toll booth to ask for directions. However, they had run out of gas and had no more money to refill, so they had to leave their car in Huoshan County and walk back home. On the way, they were tired and afraid, but they did not dare to take the main road for a fear of being chased by the police. Fortunately, after walking for a while, they encountered a truck driver who gave them a ride all the way back to their hometown in Jiangsu. After 20 years, they both have wives and children, but they have never been able to live comfortably, always feeling afraid whenever they see the police. They often have nightmares about being arrested by the police for their crimes, which keeps them in a constant state of anxiety and fear. Wei Dongyu even said that when the police came to arrest him on the bus, it was very similar to the scene in his recurring dream, and he even felt relieved and calm, no longer having to hide and live in fear. In the trial in February 2021, Zhang Shuegong's testimony was that he only wanted to knock the victim unconscious but accidentally caused their death, and that he did not intend to kill. However, according to the forensic report, the victim was attacked with extreme brutality, a fatal stab wound to the neck, with a sharp knife and a fractured skull from being beaten with a hammer. These injuries clearly showed that they intended to take the victim's life. The two murderers were young men in their 20s who had planned to rob a bank by stealing guns, but the process led to a tragic outcome. Afraid of being discovered, they ruthlessly murdered the innocent victim. Although they managed to evade capture for 20 years, the two murderers had to live in constant haunting and anxiety every day. They committed a terrible crime just to conceal a lesser one. This was a horrific mistake that cost an innocent life. It is a painful lesson about the terrible consequences of mistakes, as well as the savagery and cruelty that humans can commit when driven by fear and ambition. What are your thoughts on the case that happened today? Please comment below so we can discuss together, and if you find it interesting, don't hesitate to leave a like and subscribe to our channel to support us. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.